The bridge of the UES Defiance hummed with quiet activity as the massive warship cut through the darkness of space. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the central command station, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the stars drift past the main viewport. At 52, Morrison had spent more than half his life in space, and the vast emptiness no longer seemed threatening. It felt like home. The human colonial fleet's 7th Squadron was 3 days into a routine patrol of the Outer Rim territories when everything changed. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Mitchell sat at the communications console, monitoring the usual chatter of freight haulers and mining vessels when his equipment picked up something unusual. "Admiral?" Mitchell called out, his voice cutting through the bridge's steady murmur. "I'm getting something strange on the long-range receivers. It's not coming from any human frequency." Morrison turned away from the viewport and walked over to Mitchell's station. The younger officer's face was lit by the blue glow of his screens, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What kind of signal?" Morrison asked. "That's just it, sir. It's broadcasting on 17 different frequencies simultaneously. The pattern keeps repeating, but I've never seen anything like it." Mitchell adjusted his headset and played the transmission through the bridge speakers. The sound that filled the bridge was unlike anything the crew had ever heard. It was a complex mix of tones, clicks, and what sounded almost like music, but underneath it all was something unmistakably desperate. Even without understanding the language, everyone on the bridge could feel the urgency in the transmission. Captain Lisa Wang, the ship's intelligence officer, looked up from her own console. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who had earned her position through brilliant analytical work rather than combat experience. "Sir, the computer is trying to decode it, but these aren't human languages. The patterns are too complex for random noise, though. This is definitely intelligent communication." Morrison felt his pulse quicken. First contact with alien intelligence had been humanity's dream and nightmare for centuries. They had found evidence of ancient civilizations on dead worlds, but never encountered a living alien species. If this was really happening, it would change everything. "How long until we can understand what they're saying?" Morrison asked. Wang's fingers flew across her keyboard as she fed the signal through the ship's most advanced translation programs. "The computer is learning fast, sir. Give me 20 minutes and I should have something." Those 20 minutes felt like hours to everyone on the bridge. Morrison ordered the ship to full stop and called his senior officers to the command deck. Commander Alex Rodriguez, his executive officer, arrived first. Rodriguez was a tough man who had served with Morrison for 8 years and never questioned his decisions, but the look on his face showed his concern. "Are we really dealing with aliens, Admiral?" Rodriguez asked quietly. "Looks that way," Morrison replied. "Make sure all department heads are ready. If this is first contact, we need to be prepared for anything." Chief Engineer Danny Cooper and Dr. Kate Sullivan arrived together, followed by Captain Bobby Chen, the squadron's tactical advisor. Chen was known throughout the fleet for his ability to analyze any military situation and find weaknesses in enemy formations. Sullivan, on the other hand, was a scientist who specialized in xenobiology and had spent years preparing for exactly this moment. "Captain Wang," Morrison called out. "What do you have for us?" Wang looked up from her console, her face pale but excited. "Sir, I've got a partial translation. It's definitely a distress call, and it's coming from a system about 3 weeks away at maximum jump speed. The signal is being broadcast by something called the Karathi Confederation." She pressed a button, and the bridge speakers crackled too, life with a mechanical voice translating the alien words. "To any warrior species within range of this transmission, the Karathi Confederation faces extinction. Our worlds are under attack by the Vorthan Empire. We cannot defend ourselves. Millions of civilians are trapped. We offer technology and resources to any species willing to aid us. Please respond. Time is running out." The bridge fell silent. Morrison stared at the main screen, which now showed a star map with the signal's origin point highlighted in red. 3 weeks away. An entire civilization crying out for help, and humanity might be the only ones close enough to answer. "Sir?" Rodriguez said carefully. "We don't know anything about these aliens or their enemies. This could be a trap, or we could be walking into a war that's none of our business. Dr. Sullivan stepped forward. Admiral, this could be the most important moment in human history. We're being asked to make first contact not as explorers or traders, but as protectors. Think about what that means. Morrison nodded slowly. He understood exactly what it meant. For centuries, humans had wondered how they would be judged by other intelligent species. Would they be seen as primitive or advanced, peaceful or warlike, worthy or dangerous? Now they had a chance to be seen as something else entirely. Reliable. Captain. Chen, Morrison said, how many ships do we have in fighting condition? Chen consulted his tablet. 12 warships plus support vessels, sir. About 4,000 crew total. We're well supplied and our ships are in excellent condition. And, if we respond to this call, we'd be committing the entire 7th Squadron to an unknown situation against an unknown enemy. Yes, sir. Morrison walked back to the viewport and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an alien species was facing extinction. They had sent out a desperate call for help, not knowing if anyone would hear it or care enough to respond. But humans had heard it, and now Morrison had to decide what that meant. He turned back to his officers. Gentlemen, lady, we've all sworn an oath to protect human colonies and shipping, but before that we're human beings. And when someone calls for help, we answer. Rodriguez opened his mouth to object, but Morrison held up his hand. I know the risks, Alex. We could be flying into a trap or a battle we can't win, but we could also be the difference between survival and extinction for an entire species. That's a responsibility I'm not willing to ignore. Morrison moved to the central command station and activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the Admiral. We have received a distress call from an alien species under attack. We are changing course to render assistance. I know this isn't what we signed up for, but it's what we're going to do. Stand ready. He turned to his navigation officer. Plot a course for the Karathi system, maximum speed. As the UES Defiance and her escort ships turned toward their new destination, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to change the course of galactic history. He just hoped they would live long enough to see what they had started. 3 weeks later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Karathi system. What they saw made every person on every bridge fall silent. The system was a war zone. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching. The tactical display showed dozens of red contacts scattered throughout the system. 3 planets hung in space like wounded animals, their surfaces glowing with the heat of orbital bombardment. Around them, a massive fleet of alien warships maintained a loose blockade. My God, whispered Captain Lisa Wang as she studied her sensors. Admiral, I'm reading over 60 enemy vessels. They're huge. Morrison nodded grimly. The enemy ships were unlike anything in human military databases. They were angular and dark, covered in weapon ports that made them look more like flying fortresses than starships. Each one was easily twice the size of a human heavy cruiser. And the defenders? Morrison asked. Wang shook her head. I'm picking up maybe 15 ships that match the Karathi signal signature. They're staying close to the planets, probably trying to protect the civilian populations. Commander Rodriguez moved to Morrison's side. Sir, we're outnumbered 4-1, and that's just counting the ships we can see. There could be more. Before Morrison could respond, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Mitchell called out from his station. Admiral, I've got a Karathi vessel on long-range sensors. It's damaged and drifting about 2 million kilometers from our position. Looks like it's trying to reach the edge of the system. Morrison made his decision quickly. Mitchell, take the UES Phantom and investigate. I want to know what we're dealing with before we commit the fleet. The Phantom was the squadron's fastest scout ship, designed for stealth and reconnaissance. Mitchell chose a small crew of volunteers and launched within the hour. The journey to the damaged alien ship took 6 hours, during which the human crew got their first close look at alien technology. The Karathi vessel was beautiful in a way that human ships were not. Where human warships were built for function and durability, this alien craft seemed to flow like water frozen in space. Its hull was a pale blue-green color that shifted and changed as the light hit it from different angles. It's like they grew this ship instead of building it, said Sergeant Nick Harris, the Marine who had volunteered for the boarding party. Mitchell brought the Phantom alongside the alien vessel and used magnetic clamps to attach an airlock. The first challenge was figuring out how to get inside. The alien ship had no obvious doors or hatches, just smooth curves of hull material. Dr. Kate Sullivan, who had insisted on joining the mission, ran her scanner over the hull. The material is responding to my equipment. I think it's some kind of smart metal that can change shape. She pressed her hand against the hull, and to everyone's amazement, an opening began to form. The metal flowed away like liquid, creating a perfect doorway just large enough for humans to pass through. Inside the alien ship, everything was curved and organic. The corridors were round tubes that glowed with soft light, and the walls seemed to pulse gently like they were alive. The air was breathable, though it smelled strange to human noses. They found the alien crew in what appeared to be the bridge. There were 3 of them, and they were unlike anything humans had imagined. The Karathi were tall and slender, with 4 arms and skin that looked like tree bark. Their faces were elongated with large eyes that seemed to hold great intelligence and sadness. When the humans entered, one of the aliens tried to stand but collapsed. Dr. Sullivan immediately moved to help, her medical training taking over despite the obvious differences between human and alien biology. "Easy," she said softly. Though she knew the alien couldn't understand her words, the universal translator Mitchell carried began working immediately, turning her words into sounds the alien could comprehend. The alien captain, for that seemed to be what he was, looked up at Sullivan with eyes that showed amazement. "You came," he said, his translated words filled with wonder. "Someone actually came." Mitchell knelt beside the alien captain. "We received your distress call. We're here to help." The captain's name was Theron, and he had been trying to escape the system, to find help when his ship was damaged by enemy fire. As Dr. Sullivan treated his injuries, he told them about the war. "The Vorthans came 6 months ago," Theron explained. "They demanded our surrender, and when we refused, they began the bombardment. They don't want to destroy our worlds completely. They want to enslave us." Mitchell felt his anger rising. "How many of your people are trapped down there?" "Millions," Theron replied. "The Vorthans attack our cities but leave most of the population alive. They say we will make good workers once we are properly broken." Sergeant Harris clenched his fists. "And nobody else has tried to help you?" Theron's expression grew even sadder. "We sent calls for help to every species we knew. Most never responded. Those who did said the Vorthans were too powerful, that resistance was impossible. You are the first to actually come." Dr. Sullivan finished treating Theron's wounds and helped him sit up properly. "Tell us about these Vorthans. What makes them so dangerous?" "They are a warrior species," Theron explained. "They have conquered dozens of worlds by using overwhelming numbers and superior firepower. No one has ever successfully fought them because they are willing to destroy entire populations to make examples." Mitchell and his team exchanged glances. The Vorthans sounded like classic bullies who used fear and superior numbers to win their battles, but they had never faced humans before. "Theron," Mitchell said carefully, "what do you know about our species? What do you know about humans?" The alien captain studied Mitchell with those large, intelligent eyes. "Your ship's computer has been sharing basic information with ours. You come from a world called Earth. The data says it's a Class 12 death world." Dr. Sullivan raised her eyebrows. "Death world, a planet with conditions so extreme that most species consider it uninhabitable," Theron explained. "Your gravity is twice what most of us can survive. Your weather patterns are violent and unpredictable. Your oceans are filled with predators, and your land masses are home to creatures that exist only to hunt and kill." He paused, studying the humans more carefully. "How is it possible that intelligent life evolved on such a world?" Mitchell smiled grimly. "We didn't evolve despite our world being dangerous. We evolved because it was dangerous. Every challenge made us stronger. Every threat made us smarter. We learned to work together because alone, we died." Theron was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "Are you saying that war is natural for your species?" "Not war," Sergeant Harris replied. "Survival. But when someone threatens innocent people, survival means fighting back. Dr. Sullivan activated her communicator to contact Admiral Morrison. Admiral, we have the alien captain aboard the Phantom. I think you need to hear what he has to say about our enemies. Over the next hour, Admiral Morrison and Captain Bobby Chen participated in humanity's first diplomatic meeting with an alien species via quantum communication. Theron shared everything he knew about Vorthon tactics, ship designs, and weaknesses. What impressed Morrison most was not what the Vorthons could do, but what they had never faced. Every species they had conquered had either fled or surrendered when faced with superior numbers. None had ever fought back with the kind of desperate creativity that humans were known for. Captain Chen, Morrison said after the communication ended, "What's your assessment?" Chen studied the tactical data they had gathered. "Sir, they have more ships and bigger guns, but they fight like they've never faced real resistance. Their formations are designed to intimidate, not to handle an enemy that fights back effectively." Morrison nodded. "And what do you recommend?" "We hit them fast and hard, sir. Show them that we're not like the other species they've conquered. Make them realize they're in a real fight for the first time." As the Phantom returned to the fleet with Theron aboard, Morrison began planning humanity's first military intervention. In galactic affairs, the Vorthons thought they were dealing with another weak species that would fold under pressure. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Admiral Morrison stood in the war room of the UES Defiance, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Karathi system. Red dots marked enemy positions while blue dots showed his own ships. The odds looked terrible on paper, but Morrison had fought worse battles and won. "Gentlemen, lady," he said to his senior officers, "we're going to do something the Vorthons have never seen before. We're going to split our forces and attack from 3 directions at once." Captain Bobby Chen studied the tactical display with interest. "Sir, conventional wisdom says never divide your forces when outnumbered." "Conventional wisdom assumes your enemy thinks like you do," Morrison replied. "But these Vorthons have spent years fighting species that either run away or surrender. They've never faced an enemy that attacks when outnumbered." Morrison pointed to the display. "Commander Tony Garcia will take 4 ships and hit their main formation head-on. While they're dealing with that, Captain Amy Johnson will take 3 ships and circle behind them to rescue civilians from the planets. The rest of us will punch through their rear guard and support whoever needs help most." Commander Alex Rodriguez frowned. "Sir, Garcia's group will be facing 20 ships with only 4. That's suicide." Garcia himself spoke up from across the table. "Not if we move fast enough. These Vorthon ships are big and slow. We hit them hard, make them chase us, then lead them away from the planets." Morrison nodded. "Exactly. We're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to save the Karathi people and show the Vorthons that humans don't back down." The plan was risky, but it played to human strengths: speed, aggression, and the willingness to take chances that other species would consider insane. Morrison gave his officers 2 hours to prepare their ships and brief their crews. Captain Amy Johnson gathered her Marine commander, Sergeant Nick Harris, in the hangar bay of her ship, the UES Ranger. Johnson was known throughout the fleet for her ability to get impossible jobs done, and this mission would test even her skills. "Sergeant," she said, "we're going to drop you and your Marines directly onto the planet's surfaces while the fighting is going on above us. Your job is to find Karathi civilians and get them to safety." Harris checked his combat armor and weapons. "Ma'am, we don't know anything about the planet's environment or the enemy ground forces. That's why we're bringing the portable atmospheric processors and universal medical kits," Johnson replied. "As for enemy forces, assume they're dangerous, but not expecting us." Harris grinned behind his helmet visor. "Understood, ma'am. My Marines are ready for anything." Meanwhile, Commander Garcia was giving his own briefing to the pilots of his strike group. The 4 ships under his command were the fastest in the human fleet, but they would be facing enemies that were twice their size. "Listen up," Garcia told his crews over the communication link. "We're going to charge right at their main battle line. I know it sounds crazy, but that's exactly why it will work. They're expecting us to run or hide. Instead, we're going to fly straight at them with all guns blazing." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Mitchell, commanding one of Garcia's ships, asked the question everyone was thinking. "Sir, what happens when they start shooting back?" "We dodge," Garcia replied simply. "Human ships are built to be fast and maneuverable. Theirs are built to intimidate. We use our advantages and make them use their disadvantages." The battle began, exactly as Morrison had planned. Garcia's strike group dropped out of hyperspace right in front of the main Vorthan formation and immediately opened fire. The human ships were small compared to their enemies, but their weapons were designed for close combat and maximum damage. The lead Vorthan ship, a massive dreadnought that was larger than any human vessel, took direct hits to its forward weapon systems. Explosions rippled along its hull as Garcia's ships swept past at maximum speed. On the bridge of the Vorthan flagship, Commander Zaxxon stared at his tactical display in confusion. In all his years of conquest, no enemy had ever charged directly at his battle line. Most species tried to run or negotiate when they saw the size of his fleet. "What are these creatures?" he demanded of his intelligence officer. "Unknown, sir. They call themselves humans. Our databases have no record of their species." Zaxxon watched as the small human ships performed impossible maneuvers, dodging his return fire while continuing to attack. "They fight like predators, not prey. Order all ships to pursue and destroy them." This was exactly what Morrison had hoped for. As the main Vorthan force moved to chase Garcia's ships, they left the planets less protected. Captain Johnson's group moved in from the opposite direction, heading straight for the first planet. "Sergeant Harris," Johnson called over the communication system, "we're beginning our approach. Are your Marines ready for combat drops?" "Ready as we'll ever be, ma'am," Harris replied from the drop bay. His 20 Marines were sealed in their combat armor, each one carrying enough firepower to level a city block. They had trained for planetary assault missions, but never against aliens. The UES Ranger dove through the planet's atmosphere, while Vorthan ships fired at it from orbit. Johnson pushed her ship to its limits, using the planet's gravity and atmosphere to help her dodge enemy fire. Behind her, 2 other human ships followed the same dangerous path. On the planet's surface, the Vorthan ground forces were not prepared for what happened next. 20 human Marines fell from the sky like metal meteors, their armor absorbing the impact of high-speed landings that would have killed most other species. Harris hit the ground in the middle of what had been a Karathi city. Buildings were destroyed, and rubble filled the streets, but he could see alien survivors hiding in the ruins. The Karathi were tall and fragile-looking, nothing like the armored Vorthan soldiers that were now firing at him. "Marines, form up on me," Harris called over his radio. "Priority is civilian evacuation. Kill anything that shoots at the Karathi." The human Marines moved through the ruined city like a natural disaster. Their armor was designed to function in any environment, and their weapons could punch through Vorthan body armor like paper. The enemy soldiers, used to fighting defenseless civilians, had never faced opponents who were better armed and more aggressive than they were. Harris found a group of Karathi families hiding in a collapsed building. The aliens were terrified, but when they saw him helping injured civilians, they began to trust him. Dr. Kate Sullivan had taught all the Marines basic alien biology, so Harris knew how to treat Karathi wounds. "Don't worry," he told them through his universal translator. "We're here to help. Follow me and stay low." Above the planet, the space battle was turning in humanity's favor. Garcia's strike group had led half the Vorthan fleet on a chase through the asteroid belt, using the rocks as cover while picking off enemy ships one by one. The Vorthans were learning that size and numbers meant nothing if you couldn't hit your target. Morrison brought his main force into the battle just as the Vorthans realized they had been tricked. The human admiral had held back his strongest ships, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "All ships, this is Morrison," he announced over the fleet communication system. "Time to show these bullies what happens when they pick on innocent people." The UES Defiance and her escort ships hit the Vorthan rear guard like a hammer blow. Morrison had positioned his ships perfectly, catching the enemy between his force and Garcia's returning strike group. Commander Zaxxon watched his carefully organized battle formation fall apart as human ships attacked from multiple directions. At once, his crews were trained to fight set battles against inferior opponents, Not this kind of chaotic combat against enemies who seem to enjoy being outnumbered. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost 8 ships and the humans are rescuing civilians from all 3 planets. Our ground forces are requesting immediate support." Zaxxon realized he was facing something he had never encountered before, an enemy that fought harder when the odds were against them. These humans were not trying to win a traditional battle. They were trying to save lives, and they were willing to die to do it. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zaxxon gave an order he had never thought he would need to give. "All ships withdraw to minimum engagement range. We need to reassess our enemy." The space above the Karathi homeworld had become a battlefield, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships darted between the massive Vorthon vessels like angry wasps, striking hard and fast before disappearing into the void. Admiral Morrison watched the tactical display with satisfaction as his unconventional strategy continued to work. "Sir," Captain Lisa Wang reported from her station, "Garcia's strike group has destroyed 6 more enemy ships. The Vorthons are pulling back. Their main force," Morrison nodded. The enemy was learning that humans didn't fight like other species, but they were learning too slowly. "What's the status on civilian evacuation?" Captain Johnson reports that Sergeant Harris and his Marines have rescued over 3,000 Karathi from the first planet. They're requesting more transport ships. "Send them everything we have," Morrison ordered. "The civilians are the priority." On the planet's surface, Sergeant Nick Harris led his Marines through the ruins of another Karathi city. The alien civilians followed behind them in long lines, carrying what few possessions they could manage. Harris had never seen beings so grateful for help. "Sergeant," one of his Marines called over the radio, "we've got Vorthon reinforcements moving in from the east. Looks like a full battalion." Harris looked at the stream of Karathi families still emerging from hiding places throughout the city. There were hundreds of them, including many wounded and elderly who moved slowly. They would never make it to the evacuation ships if the Vorthons attacked. "All Marines, defensive positions," Harris ordered. "We hold this ground until every civilian is safe." 20 human Marines against 300 Vorthon soldiers should have been no contest. The Vorthons had superior numbers, heavy weapons, and years of experience conquering worlds. But they had never fought an enemy that was willing to die to protect strangers. The battle began when the Vorthons opened fire with energy weapons that could melt through most armor. The human Marines took cover behind rubble and fired back with projectile weapons that the aliens had never encountered. Where Vorthon weapons were designed to intimidate and control populations, human weapons were designed to kill efficiently. Harris watched through his scope as Vorthon soldiers fell to precise rifle fire. His Marines had trained for urban combat in conditions that would kill most aliens, and they used every advantage they had. They moved through the ruins like ghosts, appearing long enough to fire, and then vanishing before return fire could find them. "This is impossible," the Vorthon ground commander reported to his ship. "These humans fight like demons. We outnumber them 15 to 1, but they're destroying our forces." Above the planet, the space battle was reaching its climax. Captain Billy Turner, commanding the destroyer UES Relentless, had been waiting for his moment to strike. When the Vorthon flagship moved to support their ground forces, Turner saw his chance. "All power to engines," Turner ordered his crew. "We're going to ram that flagship." His bridge crew stared at him in shock. The Vorthon dreadnought was 10 times the size of the Relentless, and ramming it would mean certain death for everyone aboard. "Sir," his executive officer said carefully, "that's suicide." Turner smiled grimly. "No, that's victory. If we take out their command ship, their whole fleet falls apart. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save everything." The UES Relentless accelerated toward the Vorthon flagship at maximum speed. Turner's crew had seconds to make a choice between abandoning their captain or following him into what looked like certain death. They chose to follow. The destroyer struck the enemy dreadnought just behind the bridge section, its reinforced hull cutting deep into the alien ship's superstructure. The explosion that followed lit up the entire system as both ships died together in a ball of fire. Commander Zaxxon felt his flagship shudder and die around him. In his final moments, he understood what he was facing. These humans didn't just fight to win battles. They fought to protect others, and they were willing to sacrifice everything for that goal. The destruction of the Vorthon flagship sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet. Ships that had never retreated in battle began to pull back as their crews realized they were fighting an enemy that couldn't be intimidated or broken. Admiral Morrison seized the moment. All ships, general advance, press the attack while they're confused. The human fleet surged forward, their smaller ships swarming around the retreating Vorthons like predators around wounded prey. Morrison's tactics had worked perfectly. By showing the enemy that humans would fight harder when outnumbered, he had broken their will to continue the battle. On the planet, Sergeant Harris received word that the Vorthon ground commander wanted to surrender. The alien officer approached under a white flag, his eyes wide with something that looked like fear. "We yield," the Vorthon said through his translator. "We have never faced warriors like you. How is it possible that you fight so hard for beings that are not even your own species?" Harris looked at the Karathi families gathering around the evacuation. Ships. Children who had been hiding in ruins were now playing in the sunlight. Parents who had thought they would never see their offspring again held them close, because it's the right thing to do. Harris replied simply. The Vorthon commander stared at him for a long moment, then slowly removed his weapon and placed it on the ground. Behind him, his soldiers began to do the same. 3 days later, the last Vorthon ship left the Karathi system. The enemy fleet that had seemed so powerful was now scattered and broken, their survivors carrying stories of the humans who fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. In the aftermath of the battle, Admiral Morrison met with the Karathi leadership aboard the UES Defiance. The alien counselors were still amazed that anyone had answered their call for help, much less defeated the supposedly invincible Vorthons. "We owe you a debt that can never be repaid," the senior counselor said. "Please, tell us what you want in return for saving our people." Morrison thought for a moment. "We want to be your friends. Share your knowledge with us and we'll share ours with you. Work together to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen to anyone else." Dr. Kate Sullivan stepped forward. "If you're willing, we'd like to establish a joint research facility. Our species could learn a lot from each other." The Karathi counselors agreed immediately. Within hours, plans were being made for the first human-alien scientific cooperation in galactic history. But the most important moment came when Captain Bobby Chen received a transmission on frequencies that human equipment had never detected before. The message was brief, but changed everything. "Unknown species that calls itself human," the transmission began. "You have performed an act that the Galactic Council believed impossible. You have defeated the Vorthon Empire and saved an innocent species from extinction. The Council formally invites humanity to join as a guardian species, tasked with protecting smaller civilizations from threats they cannot face alone." Morrison stood on his bridge, looking out at the stars with new understanding. Humanity had spent centuries wondering what their place would be among the stars. Now they knew. A week later, the human fleet departed Karathi space, but they were no longer alone. 3 Karathi ships accompanied them, crewed by mixed human and alien teams. The first joint fleet in galactic history was heading toward their next mission. As the UES Defiance jumped to hyperspace, Morrison received dozens of new transmissions from across the galaxy. They were all distress calls, all addressed to the Deathworlders who answer when others cannot. Humanity had found their purpose among the stars. They were no longer explorers or conquerors. They were protectors, and the galaxy would never be the same.